Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Day 7 coverage of our daily Iditarod 2021 coverage. And I am joined by my co-host, Alex Stein, and Tony Ryder, calling in from Kenai, Alaska, and Alex is calling from California. But before we get those guys on, we got to make sure that we say we're on KVRF 89.7 in the Matsu Valley, and RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and you will get a notice as soon as this show drops. And I think that that's becoming ever increasingly important because people are asking like crazy when our next episode is going to be on. So hit that subscribe button for sure. So first off, Tony, how are you doing?
Pretty good. It's a little bit chillier down here today.
Well, good to see you back on the show. And Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's also chilly here, but I feel like since it was 55 below on the trail, in and around McGrath, that I have no right to ever complain about the weather.
That's right. Your guys' winter is like a balmy spring day here for sure. So let's jump right into this, guys. Let's start off with the two scratches that we had since we were on last. We have Riley Deich and Pete Kaiser, two relatively big names in the sport. In particular, Pete Kaiser, he won just a couple of years ago. But what's going on with those two guys, Alex?
There's not a tremendous amount of information about it. I know that there is some sickness going on around some of the dogs, and inevitably every year we have like a little bit of kennel cough and some viruses that get passed between the dog teams. This year, I would imagine that that's not an exception. The humans are doing a pretty good job of staying socially distanced, but that's not always the case with the dogs, especially in checkpoints. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Also, Riley only had 9 dogs, and Pete had 10. And we're sort of reaching the point in the race where the last few people who have scratched before this have all had 9 dogs. So I'm a little bit afraid for the viability of teams that don't have 10 or more dogs, with the possible exception of Ryan Reddington, who I think is going to blast through whatever comes in his way.
A good friend of mine, Iditarod and Yukon Quest finisher Dave Shear, said to me once, don't count the number of dogs particularly, because you can go anywhere in Alaska with 9 dogs. Now, of course, you're not going to win Iditarod like that, but he claims that you can go just about anywhere. And I know that real quick, all of these teams are going to be running into some really interesting trail as they head back, going through the gorge and the steps backwards and the Alaska range and, the burn and all that comes with it. But boy, do we have a Iditarod race, especially right there at the top with those top 3, Aaron, Brent, and Dallas. What the heck is going on out there?
Well, it looks like Dallas has taken off from Roan. So he is right now in the lead. Just a few minutes before we started taping this, he left Roan. So it looks like he is going to start that process of going up through the gorge and over the Alaska range on his way to Rainy Pass and then Finger Lake. Burmeister has been looking really, really good all day today, and made up some substantial distance. And so right now we have we have what seems like a top 5 or 6 that I would say the ultimate winner is going to be one of these mushers, and that's Dallas, Aaron Burmeister, Brent, Ryan Reddington, Wade Mars, and maybe as sort of a dark horse, I'll throw in Millie Porsold and Michelle Phillips.
Very good. Tony, what do you think about this race? I know that you've been active on social media, and I'm sure you've read all of Danny Seavey's posts. I tell you what, he is my insider. I don't have the subscription like you guys do, but I really go to him for some great analysis, and I know you do as well. So what are your thoughts with how things are panning out?
It's not surprising that it's going the way it is for Dallas. He's been posting, well, not him, but his social media team's been posting a daily video that he recorded several weeks before the race start, explaining each leg of the race. And it's creepy, it's eerie how accurate he is, almost to the minute, in his video of how his race is going to go. Even with the changes that we've had with the trail and stuff, he's right on schedule. So it's not really that surprising to see him up front and doing what he's doing. It's really exciting to see Aaron be so strong. I think he is going to definitely challenge Dallas for the win. I don't expect Dallas to have an easy ride. This is one of those, like some of the ones that Dallas had with Allie, where it was a cat and mouse back and forth kind of game. Brent Sass for me is kind of the question mark of the top 3, and that's just because with the climb back into the range through the gorge, Brent's still healing from his broken collarbone and surgery. So it'll be interesting to see if pain plays any factor in that. It'll be interesting to see if Wade Mars can catch Ryan Reddington, and I do agree that Millie and Michelle could definitely play spoilers on how the top 5 goes out. But I think our front runner is one of the our winner is one of the 3 front runners.
So, Alex, I'm going to ask you a really off-the-wall question, and I should have researched this before we went on, but I know that Dallas Seavey took a few years off. Did he win the last Iditarod that he did?
I believe he did. No, he didn't.
Mitch did.
Mitch did, because the last one that he was in was when there was the big doping scandal.
Dang, that ruins my question. I was going to ask, wouldn't that be a back-to-back winner if he wins with even taking a couple of weeks or a couple of years off? Because technically, that would still be back-to-back, right?
Yeah, technically.
Dang, that's too bad. I knew it had to be one of those pesky Seaveys that was winning back then, and I think there's a lot of Seavey fans still holding their breath for another one for sure. If he does win, that would be 5. Is that right?
That would be 5. Yeah. And that's the last time he raced was 2017, and Mitch won, but Dallas was in second.
Right, mm-hmm. Right. And that 5, that's only for is that Rick Swenson who has 5?
Yeah, Rick Swenson has 5. There's a handful of people who have 4, including Martin Boozer and Lance Mackey and Jeff King and Susan Butcher, and I have a feeling there's 1 or 2 others that I'm forgetting. Tony, you might know off the top of your head.
Well, Dallas.
Oh yeah, Dallas. Well, yeah. Dallas.
Okay, all right.
I think that's the only one you missed.
All right, guys, so let's jump into a couple of quirky stories that we have. They both have to do with checkpoints. We touched on one of them about sort of the sicknesses on the trail, and those are very common at any sled dog race, whether it's a sprint race or a race like Iditarod. That's something that mushers are very cognizant about, in particular with kennel cough. And it's interesting that is that's coming up again because, of course, they're running back through the same exact checkpoints that they did before. Tony, again, something I don't know, but are they attempting at all to place the mushers in relatively same spots where they were going out, in terms of, Wade Mars parked on the left side of the checkpoint over here.
Right.
Is he parking there, or is it kind of just where you come in?
Well, I didn't get to see how every checkpoint was set up, of course, but for McGrath, they had, for the outbound, they were all parked on one side. For the inbound, they all moved to the other side of this big area, this parking lot area. So I don't think they were putting them in the exact same spot, but they were making sure that there wasn't that type of cross-contamination as much as possible. But that's also the hub where all of the drop dogs are going, and a lot of the drop dogs were the ones that were feeling icky. So I'm sure there's still quite a few germs no matter where they are.
Right. That's interesting that they're spreading them out like that on one side or the other. I think that's real smart to do. And for folks that may not know, if they are river checkpoints or on lakes, and most of the time, unless they're in the villages, that's where they need to be because of the vast amount of space that they need to park these teams. I think that's a really good strategy to have, in particular if the trail comes in or goes out very close to that side of that checkpoint, which I'm sure they do. Another very interesting story, and it's sort of COVID related, but also fan related. I just read this before we went on air, that Deshka Landing is going to allow fans to come into the finish for, I think it's $10 a car in the parking lot, and they can watch that finish. And I think one of the guys online called it the ultimate drive-in movie. I think that's a pretty cool deal. It's interesting because I'm very familiar with the Deshka Landing setup. But my goodness, if you come in for the winter, unless you're planning on staying for a while, that could be a really long evening in the car, wouldn't it be, Tony?
Mm-hmm. I've actually only been to Deshka Landing once when I was a kid, and it was not snowy, but I can only imagine because I saw kind of the setup for the start, and I just can't imagine how you would fit many people in vehicles. But I do think it's a really cool idea to try and get some sort of hoopla and fanfare out there for them, even if you have to sit in your little car and be a bubble that way. But I think it's a really neat idea. I don't know how successful it'll be. Like you said, it's a bottleneck every year coming back from Willow. I can only imagine what it's going to be like for the spin.
Yeah. And I just hope that people that do go, if you're listening and you're thinking about going, please don't honk your car horns as the dog teams are driving by. I would guarantee 99% of the sled dogs have not been acclimatized to car horns. So please don't do that in excitement for your guys coming in. Another cool story is in Rainy Pass. Is it Rainy Pass or Finger Lake, Tony?
Sorry, say that again?
Is it Rainy Pass or Finger Lake where we're going to talk about the horses?
Rainy Pass.
Rainy Pass.
In fact, they're on the live feed right now. They are eyeing hay bales.
Yeah, tell us about that story, and do you know why those horses are there? If not, I can let our fans know.
I know just a little bit. I didn't even know that these ponies out in Rainy Pass existed until a few days ago when Hobo Jim took a picture of them hanging around the checkpoint. But apparently the lodge owner that the checkpoint is at, they have shipped in these ponies for, I don't know how long the ponies have been there, but they've been very, very curious about the checkpoint this year, especially because of the hay bales. And so the Iditarod setup that we saw at the beginning of the race is now completely different for where they're parking dogs because the ponies were coming in and stealing the hay bales, according to Insider. So they now have set up an electric perimeter so that the horses can't get to the hay bales, but I'm looking at the live feed right now, and they're all. I just want to hear the Jaws theme because they're all just kind of circling this area that have the hay bales. They're like, we know it's there.
Yes, yes. For folks that don't know, Rainy Pass is a relatively exclusive hunting lodge in the summer months where they have to fly in guests to go hunting for sheep and whatnot. And those ponies, yes, they were flown in many years ago by the lodge owners, and they're used as transportation and as pack animals for these hunters that come up and want to get the big game, as they say. And I think that's pretty cool. Can you imagine the logistics that it would take to fly out several horses on those planes to get them out there? And then of course they have to take care of them in really extreme conditions. And boy, I can tell you what, that's a pretty interesting setup for sure. I would love to fly out there one time and check out some of these more exclusive villages. I've been in a lot of these remote villages that are, set up as small towns, but these others are pretty cool looking for sure. One last story. We talked a little about this last night, and I had no idea that it was going to kick off like it did, especially on Twitter, about that dang sweater. I understand that Dallas's sweater has its own Twitter account, and it's pretty snarky on there, isn't it, Tony?
Yeah, it's kind of entertaining. I love it. Anything that kind of has fun at Dallas's expense, so it's not really at his expense, is always a good time. It's always fun to see. It's just fun to just be silly. Yep. I don't think we're often allowed to be silly these days, so it's just kind of fun to just laugh and forget about all of the drama and the politics and everything else going around.
Right, for sure. So let's go back to Alex. What else is happening out there? I know it's been a relatively slow news day, as they say, and I think that we are seeing a little bit of the effects of not having that media presence that we normally do, because normally the social media pages are just blowing up with news stories, and that's not the case, is it, this year?
No, it's, we're seeing a bunch of things on a lag, as we often do, but the difference is that usually there will be journalists, there will be newspaper reporters, and there will be TV reporters at almost every checkpoint. So there's a lot of stories that usually would be covered that we're not hearing about, or we're not hearing about for a few days afterwards. So that's, that's just part of the way this race is different this year. But one interesting thing that I wanted to mention, which I forgot before we went on the air, is, and Tony pointed this out, I didn't know this. Matt Thaler is going to have hip replacement surgery in a few weeks. Wow. And it's interesting, and it's a little bit shocking to me because Matt Thaler isn't even 40. I think he's like 37 or 38. But you get banged up a lot when you're a long distance sled dog driver.
Yeah, that's really interesting that something like that would occur at that young age. So, Alex, this is something we always do, and we haven't done it yet this year, so I'm interested to bring this back, and I would like each of us to do this. I would like to give a shout-out to a fan that you enjoy following or is really active on social media. I know, Alex, you know what I'm talking about. We've done this a lot, but I'm going to go first. We got a comment right before airtime from a guy that listens to our show over on YouTube, and his handle is called Scottish Hellcat, and he says, "Thanks for keeping us informed. I'm sitting down in Alabama listening to the broadcast right now. I was a sprint musher in Fairbanks back in the 80s and early 90s, but I love to watch the distance races. So we, in fact, have people listening all over, and we're getting quite a bit of traction over on YouTube. And I didn't expect that because we just upload the audio, but people are definitely listening on there as well. So Alex, you go next. Who do you want to give a shout out to on tonight's broadcast?
I want to mention Zachariah Hughes, who did the Iditarod for Alaska Public Media for many years, and now is one of the few reporters who's out on the trail doing stuff for the Anchorage Daily News. And if you don't follow him, he's a great follow. He's at Zach, Z-A-C-H, Hughes News. So he's always a really, really good follow and has lots of great material.
And Tony, who do you have to give a shout out to?
Oh my goodness, are we talking Iditarod fans here?
Anybody you like, whether it's somebody that people would like to follow, like Alex mentioned, or somebody that's really active, or somebody that's brand new, and you'd just like to give them some love. Who do you have that you'd like to shout out to?
All right. Well, I had her in my head really pretty much since you said that I had to pick one. So I'm going to go with Sasha. She's at AK_chick on Twitter. She's really good about not just retweeting all of the information that Dogworks Radio posts or that Alex and I or any of the Iditarod accounts post. She's very, very knowledgeable, even though I don't think she feels she's knowledgeable. She knows more than she gives herself credit for. She was one of the original crew on Musher Twitter or Iditarod Twitter back when there were just like 5 or 6 of us. So I think she deserves a shout out. I know she's really loved by a lot of people on Twitter, and so I just want to say hi and give her some love.
Excellent. And I didn't know this was a thing. We talked a little bit about it last night with our good friend Patty Christensen, who says her and her husband cuddle up under the covers to listen to us each night. And we also have another fan that claims that same ritual. Her name is Deb. She's really active on Facebook, and she does the same thing. I guess we're a little bit soothing. I don't know. I didn't think that our podcast would be getting ready for bed material, but I guess we are. So that's pretty cool. And interestingly enough, going back to YouTube, we had a fan request for our Musher profile this evening, who is Jesse Holmes, and that's who we're talking about. Alex, what do you have to say about Jesse?
Okay, so Jesse is 39 years old. He was raised in Alabama, and he left the state at the age of 16 because he had seen the movie Jeremiah Johnson and was determined to become a mountain man and spend his life in the wilderness. And he decided that he was going to move up to Alaska with his dog Freedom. So they started from Alabama, and they got up to about Montana, and then they ran out of money, and he spent 3 years in Montana working as a carpenter, building really nice houses for other people, and he saved enough money to move up to Alaska with Freedom. And initially, he was living in Eagle, starting in about 2004, and decided that he wanted to do whatever he could so that he could be an adventurer and really experience the outdoors in Alaska. He moved a few years later to Nenana, where he started amassing a kennel. He now has close to 40 dogs and still works occasionally as a carpenter when he's not out fishing and hunting and living a sort of semi-subsistence life. His place is 26 miles from the nearest road. So whenever he has to go somewhere, he has to go out to his truck with either a dog team or on a snow machine, which is pretty interesting. The place where he's living in Nenana is in a dog yard that was once owned by Jerry Riley, who was the 1976 Iditarod champion. So it's going back, he has like a real nice Iditarod pedigree. He is perhaps most famous to a lot of people for having been on the show Life Below Zero, which is one of these Alaska-based reality shows. On that show, he talked about having a 6-year relationship with a woman that ended poorly, and so he since then has more or less been devoting himself to mushing and to taking care of his kennel. When he was on the show, one of the things that they had him do was use all of his carpentry skills to rebuild a 40-year-old house so that he would have an updated, more comfortable cabin to live this subsistence lifestyle from. He recently formed Team Can't Stop to keep his fans updated about what's going on with him. When he was first approached to be on Life Below Zero, he didn't think that he wanted to do that because he thought it would get in the way of his training, and he initially turned it down, but eventually he decided that this would be a good way to build his brand and raise awareness about what he was doing and get more attention and sponsors. So that is a large part of why he agreed to do that. Meanwhile, he's been training very seriously for Iditarod and decided around 5 or 6 years ago that was his goal. So he started doing all of his qualifiers, ended up winning the Kobuk 440 in 2017 in the middle of a gigantic blizzard. He entered his first Iditarod in 2018, finished in 7th place, winning Rookie of the Year. He said that half of his dogs this year are new to long-distance mushing, and half of them are veterans that he's mushed with before. He's one of these guys who is like a real kind of backwoods bodhisattva almost, because whenever he's interviewed, he says these things that just seem so simple and yet really, really profound. So, for example, when he was interviewed before the race started, he said that he's not racing to win because that's too much stress, and that he just wants to do as well as he can and as well as the dogs can do, but he would like to get a personal best and, finish better than his first finish of 7th place. This year, he rehomed 10 of his dogs who were retired from racing. He says he likes to retire his dogs when they're 6 or 7 years old. And he emphasizes how important it is to keep a positive attitude, not only for the people around you, but especially in mushing for the dogs, because the dogs really can pick up your mood. And if you are upset or depressed or angry, the dogs will sense this and won't be able to perform as well as they could if you are calm and confident. He said about the trail being different this year, he said, every year in life is wild, weird, and different. So it's exciting rather than a disadvantage that the trail is going to be different. And I couldn't find a lot of information about the dogs that he has with him this year, but I know that his main leader on Iditarod is a dog named Tempest, whom he describes as his best friend and best leader. And he said Tempest shows tireless athleticism, and he just bounces down the trail with a fury of competitive barks and howls. So if you're looking for a guy who is sort of a throwback to what you think of when you think of Alaskan men who sort of live out in the woods, Jesse is your guy. And he is currently doing pretty well. Let me just check the standings real quick and see where he is. I believe he is like solidly in the middle, like maybe around 20 25th or so.
GPS has him at 17.
17. That's what I meant by 25th. So yeah, he's doing very well. I don't think that he's going to get better than a 7th place finish this year, but he definitely looks like somebody who could finish in the money, and maybe if enough things go his way, could get like a top 10 finish.
A little bit more on Jesse. I met Jesse around 2010 or so, right when I first moved up to Alaska. I met him through a mutual friend of ours, Hugh Neff, and that was before he was really in the mushing game. He was just getting started with thinking about racing and all that, and he is exactly what you described, Alex. I know Jesse relatively well. We've had meetings and hangs out several times over the years. So Jesse is the real deal for sure. Interestingly enough, he also bought a place, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, out on the Denali Highway, which has become the quintessential training ground for a lot of these Iditarod mushers, especially that live down here in the Matsu Valley, because there's almost guaranteed snow there, and you can pretty much run a 200 or a 300 mile loop if you wanted to right there, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And the Denali Highway is open in the off season for visitors to go from one side of the highway to the other. I think it's the Taylor Highway to the Parks Highway. I'm not sure on the other side, but that's the route. And it's an absolutely beautiful drive. So if you're ever thinking about coming up to Alaska in the summer, the Denali Highway should be on your list. And I always tell people, don't come up on a cruise ship, fly up and rent a car. And that's the best way to see Alaska, is on your own itinerary versus a cruise ship itinerary for sure. Also, I don't know if you mentioned this, Alex, when you were talking about him, but he also enjoys running ultra marathons. And if you think that Iditarod is tough, these ultra marathons are no joke. They're usually 50 to 100 miles of running for 24 hours or more straight. That just sounds like misery to me, and I'm a dog musher, so I can just imagine trying to run anywhere for 24 hours plus straight, and through mountains and everything else. But he lists that as a hobby, so that just kind of puts you where his thinking is. He enjoys doing that as a hobby. So hey, Jesse's the real deal. As you said, he's not really active on social media. He does let go a nugget every once in a while, but he's definitely one to follow, and I think he's going to be one of those guys in the next few years that silently creeps up on us, even though he does have that Rookie of the Year, and I think he's going to do very well in the next few years to come. Tony, do you have anything else on Jesse before we go?
Yeah, we talked about this before we went on air, and I couldn't think of anything, but it hit me. I saw him come into the finish in 2019. I was there out on almost the beach because the ice had gone out. But he was right ahead of Lance Mackey. And as they approached the Burled Arch, Jesse actually took his team off to the side a little bit and stopped and let Lance go up and finish ahead of him. And while I wasn't right there when it happened, apparently it was an incredibly emotional moment, because at that time it was supposed to be Lance Mackey's final race. And then he went on to win his entry fee for the next Iditarod there at the Musher's Banquet. So he did return last year, which was totally unplanned. But it was just such a really nice moment. And even though, Jesse is competitive, he still wanted to take the time out to respect truly one of the legends and the greats of the race and of the sport in general. And then as far as being active on social media, he goes on binges on Instagram. Once in a while, he just works really, really hard to just post a lot of stuff on Instagram stories. And it's always training the dogs in water or just really random brush hauling and stuff. So it's kind of an interesting look into his life, away from the reality TV show.
Yeah, definitely cool to check out the Instagram for sure. And if I can find his page, I'll put it over on the show notes. Alex, anything else before we go?
No, I just wanted to mention real quickly that at the back of the pack, we have Will Trashinsky and Hal Hansen. And then there is a group of people who are, there's a group of like 7 or 8 people who are sort of pretty solidly at the back. So it would seem to me like your Red Lantern is going to be one of those 7 or so who are mostly in Ophir, except for Hal and Will, who are coming into Ophir. I think they're both within about 20 miles of Ophir.
Very good, guys. This is our Day 7 coverage. We've been on for a week solid now, and I tell you what, by this time tomorrow, we may have a real good idea who's going to win this thing. Danny Seavey, our consummate reporter there on Facebook, is saying at about 10 or 11 o'clock tomorrow night, Alaska time. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Alex, I think we've only been on air one time when there was a winner. And I remember that. We ended up staying on, and we were doing a live show on KVRF. And I know this is a Dallas thing, but I think it was Dallas that won the race that time when we did live. Do you remember that?
I do, and I think it was Dallas too. And it was very exciting. It may even have been his first win.
Yeah.
And I remember we were going off the air, and then they said, "Oh no, just stay on the air until he comes in." And it was, it was clear that he would be in within, I think, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. But that was a very exciting year.
It was for sure. Okay, guys, on behalf of my co-host, Tony Ryder and Alex Stein, this is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio.